The newest Five Nights at Freddy's trailer has been released, and although only just a few minutes of footage, we've been handed new clues, character reveals and lore details that deepen many mysteries. In this video I'm covering details from the trailer about how it rewrites what we thought we knew about the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. The line, "Everyone called it an accident," spoken by the character many fans suspect to be Henry Emily, carries heavy implications about the public perception of Charlotte's death outside Fredbear's family diner. In the eyes of the community, the tragedy may have appeared as nothing more than a horrific malfunction, the puppet leaving its post, finding Charlie outside and ultimately failing to save her. With no witnesses and no evidence tying William Afton to the scene, the event could easily have been written off as a technical failure rather than foul play. Henry, as the puppet's creator, would naturally shoulder the guilt, believing that his own programming allowed the animatronic to wander or behave unpredictably. To the outside world, Charlie's injuries and her death might have been blamed on the puppet itself, fueling the idea that it was just another tragic robotic accident. But beneath that surface-level narrative lies the darker truth the trailer hints at. Afton's involvement remained completely unseen, and Henry has been living with the weight of a mistake that was never really his. The puppet's so-called malfunction likely became the turning point that drove Henry to shut down and abandon the Fredbear's family diner. In the aftermath of Charlie's death, Henry would have seen the tragedy not only as a personal failure, but as proof that the diner's animatronic systems were no longer safe under his watch. This prompted him to relocate the remaining technology. The springlock suits were transferred to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, while the puppet itself, now tainted with grief and tragedy, was sent to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This separation helps explain how the animatronics ended up divided between different sites and underscores Henry's attempt to distance the newer businesses from the catastrophic events at the diner, even though the consequences of that day continued to haunt all future Fazbear establishments. The moment where Charlotte stands on stage crying feels less like a malfunction and more like a desperate call for help, one that only the audience is unable to understand. When the curtain pulls back for her and she carries the boy onto the stage, the child shows no fear. The next cutaway, where the pair kneel in unison, almost resembles a stage performance more than a spontaneous action. It suggests that what we are seeing is Charlotte, the real girl, the trapped soul, acting out her pain, while what the audience sees is only the puppet going through programmed motions. The puppet cannot speak, cannot explain, can only mimic her sorrow through its own mechanical cries. To the viewers, it's a stage show, but to Charlotte it is something much darker, a silent scream for help, endlessly repeated, trapped beneath the spotlight of a stage that was never meant to become her prison. Trapped inside the puppet, Charlotte's spirit may have reached a breaking point, a desperate need for change born from years of being forced to watch children walk through the same doors where she once died. Powerless to speak and unable to free herself, she may have realized that the only way to protect others was to make the pizzeria itself too dangerous to remain open. In this interpretation, Charlotte becomes the driving force behind the Bite of 87, guiding events toward a catastrophic incident that would guarantee the public's fear of the animatronics and ultimately shut the restaurant down. By ensuring the bite happened, she would be acting not out of malice, but out of a twisted form of guardianship. If parents believed their children were at risk of suffering the same horrific fate, then no child would ever again be allowed near a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. In her eyes, closing the restaurant and every other location was the only way to stop the cycle of violence that had begun with her own death. In the trailer, Vanessa's fragmented memories of a dim corridor and hiding under a bed feel eerily familiar. The layout and atmosphere strongly resemble the house on the hill, the same location tied to the night segments of FNAF 4 and from The Midnight Motorist. Rather than recalling her own past, Vanessa appears to be reliving someone else's trauma. The crying child's memories are invading her dreams, and for good reason. The fear, the vantage point under the bed, the oppressive hallway, these aren't just flashbacks but emotional memories from a child who was living in constant terror. The crying child's final memories so strong they've imprinted themselves onto those around. I've previously discussed my suspicion that Vanessa from the first movie may actually be Elizabeth Afton, operating under a similar arrangement to Charlie, a soul controlling an artificial body. The strongest hint came from the moment Vanessa's eyes subtly change color while talking to Mike Schmidt, a detail that feels too deliberate to ignore. This visual cue aligns with the idea of Elizabeth is using an illusion disc to mask her true identity and animating an endo form, much like how Charlie manifests through the puppet. If Elizabeth is indeed behind Vanessa's outward appearance, it would explain her strange mix of empathy, secrecy, and familiarity with Afton's legacy. It also reframes her interactions with Mike as more than coincidence, suggesting that Elizabeth, like Charlotte, has found a way to live her life outside of the machinery. Like Charlotte's soul being in puppet while she controls the Charlie bot, if Elizabeth is controlling an endo, then her soul is still at the circus baby rental facility. Elizabeth Afton's presence at Circus Baby Rentals during the time of the second movie places her soul in an unexpectedly significant position close to the Fredbear plush, an object I have previously suspected had been used to store the crying child's memories. Emotional fear, longing, grief can bleed from one entity to another. If the Fredbear plush carries the imprint of the crying child, then Elizabeth's presence at the rental facility intertwines the two Afton children in a way that the films could subtly be hinting at without directly explaining. In earlier videos, I explored the idea that the Fredbear plush originally served as a kind of emotional anchor for the crying child, storing fragments of his memories or personality before being removed to help him heal. Without that anchor, the crying child was left without his past, leaving the Fredbear plush itself a container of raw, unresolved emotion. This is where Rory from Didophobia becomes crucial. In that story, Rory projects his overwhelming emotions, fear, onto the environment around him. Rory's emotional energy could be empowering the Fredbear plush, receiving the crying child's memories as a consequence. The plush would become the point where the crying child's trauma would overwhelm Rory as well as Elizabeth. Both were captive in the facility to dream the Afton boys' greatest nightmares. In these shared dreams, she felt the fear of having to run the darkened hallway, watching the clock, listening for footsteps that meant everything would soon go wrong. It was the same dread crying child had endured nightly, fearing the moment Henry returned home from Junior's bar. Each time Henry walked down that long hall, tired, guilty, volatile, the boy's panic skyrocketed. Elizabeth, now bound to these dreams, felt all of it, the instinct to hide, the helplessness of knowing exactly how the scene would end, but being powerless to change it. What made the dreams worse was how they intensified as the fateful week progressed. Henry's guilt and stress mounted and crying child's fear sharpened. Every night in the dream, the moment Henry opened the door became more vivid, more crushing, as though the memory itself was decaying and growing unstable. Elizabeth felt that emotion. Henry's arrival, the creak of the door, and the escalating tension weren't just her brother's memories anymore. They became part of her own story, a haunting she would carry with her. As we wrap up the last trailer for Five Nights at Freddy's 2, it's clear that the film is setting the stage for a more interconnected story than the first movie had hinted at. All the small details, the returning characters, the new faces, the dreamlike imagery, and the unsettling lore threads suggest that what we've seen so far is only been the surface of something much bigger. Whatever happens next, this sequel looks ready to redefine what a FNAF universe can be.